Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 261. The Porous PhD. This is it. This is the moment. Yes, this is the end of our literacies trilogy, but in many ways this trilogy commenced with a request from Madeline. Hi Madeline. And Madeline wants me to talk about how to incorporate born digital objects into a PhD. How can a PhD be rendered, as I've described it, porous? Now, Madeline is working in history, and she wanted me to talk through the new and innovative strategies that are available for the presentation of historical evidence, particularly oral sources, oral history, sonic media. And I am so proud, I cannot express, I'm getting quite teary, I am so proud that at Flinders University we have reached this level of maturity in engaging with digitisation. And I am proud of this, and of course for our colleagues around the world, the digital doctorate may not be part of what you're doing, but what we're experimenting with at Flinders University, how we're thinking about you enroll in a PhD digitally, your professional development is engaged with digitally, and you are examined digitally. Those strategies that we're trialling at Flinders University will transform the PhD internationally. So Madeline's request is brilliant, because we now at Flinders University have the first generation, the first cohort of students that enrolled digitally and are now about to be examined digitally. So therefore, noting our experience and our expertise for our friends all around the world and our colleagues at Flinders University, I want to talk about how to create the porous PhD, exploring the boundaries around the new version of your PhD. Let me explain a little bit more. This is my PhD. Decades ago. I started it in 1993 and I graduated in 1995. So that's how old this thesis is, right? Now this is the traditional PhD. So many universities around the world are continuing to have a thesis like this, bind it like this, and send it out to 2 or 3 examiners around the world. But this model of presenting a PhD and examining a PhD is transforming. So let me today present the 10 ideas, the 10 strategies, the 10 moments of innovation that might just challenge you to think about the parameters of your PhD in a different way. The porous PhD. So I'm presenting 10 maxims for you today, but I just at the start wanted to present one trope to you that is the guide for our work and indeed provides the conclusion to our literacies trilogy. And that trope I wanted to introduce to you is, of course, multi-literacies. This word, multi-literacies, gained currency, gained momentum at the turn of the century after Mary Kalantzis and Bill Cope presented their book Literacies, building on the work of the New London group that commenced in 1996. So this book created the multi-literacies project that we're still dealing with to this day, moving beyond traditional theories of literacies as singular, learning to read and write, if you will, and now welcoming, engaging with the plurality of literacies. So this multi-literacies project recognised how media are changing, how popular culture is changing as most of our communication systems suddenly become multimodal. So our written texts suddenly are aligning with tactile engagements, visual engagements, sonic engagements. So think about it when you send a text message, but you add a smiley face. Think about it when you do a Facebook post and add an animated GIF. Think about a PhD, Madeline, that embeds sonic files. So there is no singular set of rules that now configures meaning. I would argue there's never been a set of rules that configures meaning, but I digress. Literacy is no longer singular. We now have to negotiate multiple literacies with diverse people in plural contexts. And of course, those contexts include a doctoral program. So there is no singular way to communicate. There is no singular way to configure, construct, and examine a PhD. Yes, we make meaning by reading. Yes, we make meaning by writing. But we also make meaning through the creation of sonic and visual materials. So think about James. I'll return to James. Hi, James. I told you I'd mention you. Think about James. Think about all our remarkable scientists out there who are outstanding photographers. And we'll talk in a sec about James and the bees. But James is a better scientist because he is multimodal, because he is multiliterate, and he developed his visual literacy through photography in enabling his research. Now it's the same for Madeline and our wonderful students out there testing the parameters of the oral, and the sonic. These are exciting times. So a PhD is a degree. It's a learning environment. I think we often forget that. The PhD has sort of become this Mount Everest thing, right? And it's seen to represent so much more than it actually is. A PhD is a degree. It is a research degree. So through this thesis, you are learning literacies. So if you will, a PhD is education in research literacies. You are in a teaching and a learning program. And the literacies that you are learning through the PhD allow you to have full participation, social, cultural, intellectual and professional participation in academic life. So new literacies are required for these new times. This is not only about technological innovations, right? Like some of the bad definitions of digital literacy we talked about last week. This isn't about new platforms or new interfaces, no. This is about much more considered theorizations of learning, of assessment, and indeed of research and research dissemination. It's also about a more ethical and empathic understanding of the people and the contexts that we study. We as researchers are here to serve our society, not to appropriate, to grab the words and the views of others and squeeze them like a toothpaste into our particular research agenda. That's not what we're doing here. We've arrived at an interconnected mode of production and consumption. And to explore that matrix, I'm using Lancashire and Nobel's concepts from 2006 in particular. Also, we're creating interconnected modes of research dissemination. We can now activate incredibly multimodal presentations of our research. So as you can see, the word multiliteracies also captures a new way of being an academic, a new way of thinking about academic work. Instead of academic work being basically command and control, you've got to command and control this data set. We're now working through much more horizontal, team-based, collaborative research relationships. Our workers have always been geographically dispersed, and that was even before COVID. Our research work is mobile, and our ideas must be mobile. We can select the most effective and efficient modes and interfaces for the dissemination of our research. And so this movement requires a new understanding of literacy, and also a new understanding of the literacies of the citizens with whom we wish to engage. And this is the multiliteracy framework. Okay, so there's the trope we're going to apply. Let's do this. I'm now going to quickly present 10 ways your thesis today can be rendered porous. Let's create the porous PhD. What can a transformation of the PhD from this thing into a porous digital document, what can it do for you and what can it do for the societies that we're meant to serve? Here we go. 1. Challenges and changes referencing. The print-based PhD used to require that examiners would receive that thesis in the mail, and then they would read it, and what we would then do is we would take it to the library or we'd take it to our work offices, and we would spend a day, a few days, a week checking the references, right? Now that would add days, sometimes weeks to the examination. But of course now with the digital doctorate, you can present your PhD and your references on the screen. So that means that examiners can check your references and your referencing and your interpretation of those sources in real time. So we're reading it, all right, there's the reference, so how have we handled that? Let's check, is the referencing correct? Good. Is the interpretation correct? Good. We can do it in real time. So this porous PhD is great for examiners because it means we can, at speed, verify your rigour and verify your information literacy. The challenge for students is that, of course, if you are inaccurate in your referencing or something goes a bit weird in your EndNote library, and of course that never happens, then even the, what word should I choose? Even the slackest of examiners will find you out. So the porous doctorate requires the highest standards of information literacy from you, because examiners can check you at greater speed and greater depth. 2, embedding born digital objects, BDOs. The great gift of digitising the doctorate is it changes forever how the thesis can be presented. So it's no longer limited to paper. You can embed sonic files, visual files into your text, not as references. You can actually embed the objects to be seen and to be heard. Now for disciplines involving interviewing, so it's a lot of the social sciences and health sciences, this change can really alter your relationship with evidence. And of course in disciplines like oral history, the born digital object changes your entire methodology. Madeline is enacting this process in her doctorate, presenting the voices of her interviewees in the thesis, in situ, for the examiners and other listeners to hear and engage with. Magnificent. So those of you that know something about the debates in oral history over the last, 40 years about authenticity and the authentic voice in history, know how revelatory this moment is. The capacity to put into the thesis high quality, high resolution, visual or audio material is transformative of the PhD. Now some of our students will be absolutely at the vanguard of this opportunity, and Madeline is there. You rock, Madeline. But think about it in terms of your discipline. Do you simply want to, here's a traditional thesis and let's PDF it? That's fine, that's digitising the doctorate, but it's not rendering it porous. If you want to actually explore the capacity of digitisation to transform how a thesis is presented, then this is your time. It'll change not only how a thesis exists, not on the page, but on the screen, and also how it is examined. 3, scaffolding your research through mixed media materials. Now, academic integrity, research integrity, self-plagiarism. 3 huge phrases and ideas that exist in contemporary doctoral education. These are big topics that are transforming how we think about the higher degree. And of course they are changing research more generally and are changing this business as usual mode of doing research. Now in the old days, there used to be this notion that, you just get 3 refereed articles published, whack them together, write an intro and an outro, and that's a thesis. But we've now got a changing environment, colleagues. And that changing environment has come through the complicated transformations to authorship, through a range of codes of research conduct around the world, at its most basic, coming from the Vancouver Protocol. That's one element. But then there's a second element. And a range of academic commercial publishers are changing the copyright around our ideas, our articles. Have a look at the contracts we are having to sign to give away our refereed articles to commercial publishers. So therefore, what those contracts do is they're changing, they're limiting our capacity to do the old-fashioned cut and paste. All right, so that was in that journal, thanks for playing, whack that back into the thesis. The capacity to actually cut and paste from a refereed article and move it without any consequences or questioning at all back into the thesis, all those moments have gone. Self-plagiarism. Wow. But also copyright control. But the Porous PhD is providing really innovative strategies to try and manage this new environment. And COVID, ironically, has also provided the fuel, the engine to create new ways of moving material through space that respects the Research Code of Conduct, but also understands the copyright transformations that exist in publishing. Because if you think about it, COVID now pretty well transformed just about every conference presentation that you would do to a digital presentation with a URL, with a link. So if you've participated in any of these conferences in the last year or so, then you can self-cite. You can present the outings for your research so examiners can see it. So you can present the multimodal contemporary reality of your research to display to the examiner how you have disseminated your research. So this transcends the usual, here's the 10 articles I wrote during the candidature of my PhD. You know, there's the contents page, next page, here are the 10 articles I produced during my PhD, right? It's beyond that. This allows you to link to video abstracts, to conference presentations, perhaps podcasts that you've constructed through your candidature. So you can demonstrate to examiners how your argument has been constructed. Wow. So they can click and they can hear you, or they can click and they can see you. And that's great around the world. But for many Australian institutions that still do not have an oral exam, it's a way for examiners around the world to verify in their own mind that the work that they are reading, you have produced. That's the point of an oral exam. I would argue that you have one job in an oral exam, and that is this the student's work? And you have to test the student until you can confirm that it is their work. And in many ways, this scaffolding, this digital scaffolding in a PhD allows you to achieve the same goal. So these materials confirm that your research is actually your research. And now, through digitisation, what could have been an ephemeral conference presentation in front of 2 people, one of whom was your mother, you can now show digitally the impact of your research. It travels beyond the conference hall. 4. Demonstrating research dissemination. The Porous PhD allows you to track and present the pathways through your research and how that research is used by a diversity of stakeholders. I'm going to use the word. And that can be done through journalism, through blogs, through podcasts, and yes, through social media. Altmetrics can be part of this conversation, but if you've produced journalism or blogs, a lot of you, thousands of you, have produced blogs through your candidature, you can demonstrate the wide dissemination of your research and how you engaged with diverse audiences through your publications. That diversity of audiences, brilliant. So you can cite tweets. Amazing times. You can cite journalism. You can show the comments that have emerged in response to your research. So it means you're not waiting for citations, always a lagging indicator. Through social media channels, you can show the use of your research, the engagement with your research, and yes, perhaps even its impact. 5, powerful visuality. Hi, James. I told you I would do this. You rock, James. So I'm going to talk about James. I'm going to talk about bees. James is legend. Bees, legendary. Let's do bees. Hi, James. So We have a remarkable student. In fact, we have a wonderful research culture at Flinders University, the B crew. Love the B crew, love the Sharkies, love the Shark crew, love the B crew, right? Okay, so we're looking at bees. Now, James is a stunning researcher of bees, but he's also a truly brilliant photographer. And during his candidature, he's been developing up his science photography arm, the entrepreneurial arm of his career. So what I love is at the base of James's email, he describes himself as a researcher and photographer. My job here is done. But for those of us who take photographs, and I have 1% of James' talent, can I say, but a lot of us through our career have taken photographs to accompany our research, okay? This high quality photography, design material, if you will, can now be incorporated into the thesis. In my thesis, I had lots of photography, but it was badly presented because it had to be printed on a pretty basic printer, okay? So the quality of the photography wasn't clear. Now it can be. It can be digitally included into the thesis or indeed exist outside of the thesis but directly cited. So James is an incredibly talented photographer of an incredibly difficult topic. Think about photographing bees. So the Porous PhD allows James and all of you who are photographing objects, ideas, things, designs, architecture as part of your PhD to present your work in high resolution and directly connected to your thesis. Now these photographs can appear in situ within the thesis or indeed in some mode of photo story outside of the thesis and cited within it. Huge. 6. The sonic future of doctorates. Sonic media and auditory cultures are our future. They are powerful literacies. They're often called secondary literacies, and I'm cool with that because what happens with sonic media is it exists, it floats in and around the rest of our lives. So we can be doing something, housework, exercising, going for a walk, driving, doing the commute. We're doing one job and sonic media accompanies us as we're engaging in that primary task. So therefore, think about how sound is used in your thesis. Think about sound in your research. Sonic art, sonic architecture, oral history, soundscapes. Always remember that sonic references are transformative of your communication systems. You might remember from our discussion last week of digital literacies within us. Digital literacies, time-biased communication. That is our future because the time-biased, the sonic media build communities through time. So remember now, today, that you have the opportunity to use sonic materials, whatever your research area, and they can be referenced directly in your chapter to provide an accompaniment to the examiner as they are reading your chapters. 7. Supplementary files. This is big too. Now you might decide, and you're going, oh, what's going on here? You might decide, I'm presenting a conventional thesis. I'm presenting a conventional thesis. It might be PDF'd, but it's a conventional thesis, as if it was on paper. And that's cool. That's absolutely cool. But if you want to present a series of sonic or visual files, or you want to present, say, the journals, the field notes from your research, then supplementary digital files are a great option and, can I say, highly underutilized at the moment. So that means here's the thesis, the examiners can read the thesis, cool, and then the examiners can decide their degree of engagement with the supplementary files that have been presented. Now, supplementary files are part of a lot of journals now, academic journals now, to demonstrate or present data sets or code for the confirmation of referees or indeed examiners. So this allows you to present the traditional thesis, but also present the attachments or the materials that attend the thesis, that verify components of it that are available for the examiner to check. Superb. 8. The PPP and showing influence. The PhD by prior publication has a long history, a long heritage actually, but right now it's going through an absolute revolution. An absolute revolution. Once a day, I'm getting somebody contacting me wanting to do a PPP PhD. But the trick with the PPP is, yes, you've got these articles, and that's great. So you present the articles that you've engaged with and produced through your career. That's brilliant. But that's not the PPP. It's got to start with a contextual statement that shows the impact of those articles, shows how they've moved, shows your influence, your original contribution to knowledge in the thesis. So the Porous PhD allows you in the PPP to present a direct and clear engagement of how your articles have moved through to stakeholders. How has your research been used? Yes, citations are part of that story, altmetrics, but also blogs, podcasts, videos can show how your meanings, your interpretations, your research has travelled through time and to diverse groups. The PPP requires an important contextual statement. Who are you? What's your research? And why does it matter? Influence, engagement, impact can be demonstrated visually to enable already published articles to show your relevance. 9. Nearly there. The artifact and the exegesis thesis and the presentation of journals. Now, as we all know, the other emerging area of a PhD internationally is the artifact and exegesis mode of a doctorate. So this is the mode of doctorate, as most of you remember, where we've got a series of artifacts, objects, performance, jewellery, we might be dealing with furniture, something that actually captures that object. That object could be a film, could be a sonic architecture, anything. So the artifact. Then we have the exegesis, which from the Greek means explanation. And the exegesis explains the research in the artifacts. Artifact, exegesis. Now, the challenge methodologically, if I'm frank, is how we align those artifacts with the exegesis. What's the connection? And that's the methodologically quite complicated work that exists in this space. Yes, we have practice-led methods, practice-based methods, etc., etc., etc. But what exists in that mitigating space often are journals, diaries, or fieldwork notes, okay? And yes, these can be presented as supplementary files or digital appendices. So that means for practice-led examinations, these supplementary files, your diaries, how your work has been conducted in 3, 4, 5 years, those diaries can be presented for examiners to review. So in methodological terms, this is also transformative. Wow. And 10, you knew we'd go here, lab notes, lab books. And look, I wanted to talk about lab books and lab notes because this really is a booming area and is transforming, I would argue, science, let alone how we examine a PhD. Now, we all know that research is based on transparency, openness, rigour and repeatability. So let's talk about the electronic lab books and how they are available for verification by examiners. Right. Now, there's lots of firms, I mean, there's hundreds, literally hundreds of interfaces and companies that are moving into the space. Labware, SciNote are great examples. Benchling also looks fantastic to my eyes. And all of these firms and all of these platforms share and record experiments all in one place. So there is, if you will, a repository for your experiments. A notebook for notes, tools to help students manage the project, and all of this material is shareable and it's mobile. And of course it's great because it's shareable as an entire book or specific pages. This is a game changer. Most of these interfaces are cloud-based and present safety and compliance protocols and offer security for data sets. Now, these documents also confirm, I would argue, lab efficiency. They enable the management of workflow by supervisors. But I think their weakness at this point is they're a bit template-based. So I'm hoping as this genre emerges and diversifies, that again we'll have a diversity of ways in which information can be presented. A bit templatey at this point, but these platforms are changing at speed and they allow workflow to be tracked and to be confirmed. They are portable, and yes, they allow examiners to see your work. And information is very rarely lost, and it is completely searchable. Wow. So if you want, and we all should want, your examiners to be able to check your work and see how it was scaffolded, then these are amazing interfaces to enable that project. Okay. So team, welcome to the Porous PhD. That's a phrase I invented for you, but it's part of a project that all of us who have watched these vlogs, all of us, we have shared. We have done this. We have built something meaningful. So if you ever ask yourself how to enable literacies, even digital literacies, then we have some strategies today. And the goal of literacies, at its most basic, is to empower your research and empower you. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.